How you doing? Welcome back to the Educated Colonel Snap channel. So Secondary just released their OTA. We've got 5 changes for you. I do like a lot of these changes. I think Secondary has been doing a pretty good job with making sure things are going in the right direction in terms of balance. So got a lot to talk about. Nothing to do but get started. All right, let's get started. So we do have 5 changes here for today. First one, pretty important one, we're touching Loki, or at least we're addressing some of the Loki concerns. So Collector's moving from a 2-2 to a 2-0, so it's losing 2 power. 2 power is massive in terms of how much it affects a game state. Usually, even 1 power is really significant, right? The Legion going from 5-8 to 5-7 definitely mattered a lot. So things like that, 2 power is quite big. The ability staying the same, and Loki's not getting adjusted at all. A lot of people were considering it going from a 3-5 to a 3-4. That's not happening. So it's Collector's kind of taking the heat for all of Loki's sins, which is something Loki loves to do. So, apt comparison here. But generally, the one concern is like maybe Collector is going to be less viable in a lot of other decks, but once again, Loki's more of a Dino addition. In so fact that you don't even need to play Dino, but it has like the same vibe of play style, at least build style in Dino decks. So Collector was already like mostly using it. It used to be used in things like bounce and stuff, but it really wasn't anymore. So definitely think it's fine in that capacity. So generally, I'm okay with this Collector nerf. I don't think Loki needed a super heavy nerf anyways, and this seems to be like fitting there. So I'm generally happy with this. A little bit sad for Collector itself, but in terms of like the Loki archetype, I really didn't want Loki to be like unplayable or anything like huge nerfs, and already Mobius is slotted to come out, and that's going to affect the game style anyways. So I think this is a okay nerf. We can see what they have to say about it. Tirlir Tiven, I hope that I pronounced that right. Better known, has become the primary power carrier in virtually every Loki base deck. So basically, this is like the main win condition in Loki decks, which I think is super correct, right? Like Loki itself, let's say you're flipping 5 cards over, Loki becomes a 3-10, and Loki's way better than a 3-10, right? Because you're also giving that -1 cost, which is a huge ability. So there's just so much power on top of Loki that with Collector that it makes sense to nerf that combo a little bit. We're sure he'll still fill that role. Yeah, you're still going to play Collector with this change, but this should help other decks build boards that are least threatening. It's a ding to his use in other decks, but that was already pretty low. And Loki will assure he always has 1 or more homes available. That's true, because you're pretty much always going to be playing Collector with Loki from now on. So this makes sense. So and Loki's a pretty variable card or flexible card, so I think this makes sense. This change also makes it more vulnerable to a few counters, such as Shadow King is going from a 3-3 to a 2-3. That's a massive change, and I would say like really impactful. A lot of times, this card used to be a 4-3, by the way, guys. Like it's dropped down 2 base power. But a lot of times when you wanted to play a card like Shadow King, it just like 3 power was so expensive to play in terms of what it did. So, like the chance of what it does. So it was always like kind of iffy. Now 2 power, that's in the likes of Jeff, that's in the likes of, and there's not that many good 2 drops. So this could be like an auto include, kind of like armor sometimes is auto include, even though like you don't fully need it. This could be like the new armor in terms of playstyle. So I think this is a massive change. I would argue maybe even the most impactful meta game change now, because now you have to be thinking about Shadow King in like random decks that you really couldn't justify it before, where as a 2 drop that's very fair to do. So It also makes things like Luke Cage feel a little bit better, right? Because you Luke Cage will deny this ability. So there's actually quite a lot of of meta game adjustments to be made with this one change. So I think this is pretty impactful. It makes me want to add Shadow King into some of the other decks that I've been playing. So I think this is a really impactful change, and also kind of like does a lot in how you deck build and how you deck design, and like deciding, oh, do I want to have a deck that like loses to Shadow Kings, things like that. So let's see what they have to say about this one. So the recent surge in Shuri and the Collector has been good news for Shadow King, which is true, who's been seeing play despite being relatively inefficient. So this card sucks. even even in the Shuri collective meta, this card still is doing poorly. Occasionally reliant on revealing last true, right? If you have priority, this sometimes doesn't help you. We decided to take a similar approach here to what we did with Luke Cage and Invisible Woman, boosting his base rate to a level that players can justify playing in a wider range of strategies than Silver Surfer and Cerebro. Yeah, Silver Surfer and Cerebro, those were like the main play styles, but now you can kind of just put it in a lot of other decks. We expect this to relieve some of the pressure on Shang-Chi by diversifying the ways players can counter huge amounts of power. That is super interesting because right now Shang-Chi has that omnipresence like potential in the meta where you're always thinking about Shang-Chi. I wonder if you can get to a point where you have to think about Shang-Chi and Shadow King, where it's just present enough where you auto include Shadow King in your decks because it's good enough where you're always thinking, oh, what if they Shadow King me here? Instead of like you're always thinking, what if they Shang-Chi me here? So I think this is super fair. I think this helps the metagame in a cool way where you can start adding like tech counters without really struggling too hard, right? Shadow King is like the not Shang-Chi's like the most common one where you just tech it even though it makes no sense for your deck because the card's so good. If Shadow King's a two drop with 3 base power, you don't even mind just playing it for tempo, right? Like that's pretty good tempo. Like that's super good. Like that's super solid. So also makes this changes a lot. Like Nebula loses a lot of power. Like a lot of things just like lose power with this. So I like this a lot. I think this could be pretty good for the meta. Next up we have Lady Civ. So Lady Civ is going from a 3/4 to a 3/5. I think this is fair. The card wasn't super oppressive or anything, and it had a decent amount of decks that you played in. So I think the most common one is Apocalypse, but you can also just go Lady Civ into Ghost Rider. I think that was a good 2-card combo that did a lot of damage. And some people played in Agatha and whatever. That's not really my cup of tea, but definitely think this is a card that could use a buff. It's not like oppressive or anything like that. So, I'm fine with it. I'm not the biggest discard player, but, I'm down with a change like this. Next up, we have Lady Civ is one of those cards that's always been solid and had a home in a couple of specific decks. Most obviously, Agatha, Hela as well. Yeah, Hela with Death, that's true, and then Agatha, yeah. However, her individual performance hasn't been stellar, so she's kind of bad, even though she's played a lot, is what they're saying. And when a linchpin card for so many decks isn't doing well, we like to poke at that a bit. We don't feel this will upend the metagame, it won't, or anything, but pushing some medium performing decks towards some time understands one of the things we like to do with the OTA, so let's try it out here. I think that's super fair. This is a card that isn't metagame breaking, and giving it 1 power just helps a little bit. So I'm down with this. I think this is super cool. Next up, we have Spider Ham. So this is a super requested change for players. They wanted it back as a 1/1, and I think that's super fine. So this card used to be super oppressive before as a 1/1, but they did move it to 2/2, and then they also changed the ability where it targets your leftmost card instead of your highest cost card, so it doesn't always hit your best big bad, things like that. So now it's a little bit less like flexible and killing everything you need. It just hits your leftmost, but it's still pretty good. And I think the change kind of made the play rate drop off a cliff. So now it's going back to 1/1. I think that's super fair. What do I have to say about this? We suspected the change in last week's patch might be damaging to Spider Ham's usage, but we weren't sure. Probably something like 65% sure, but that's a fair amount of doubt. Given we had the OTA coming just 1 week later, we decided to launch the patch with his 2-2 stats and buff it to 1-1 if that week indicated he needed the help. So basically, after the change, his play rate dropped off a cliff is pretty much what they're saying. It did, so here we are. So I think that's helpful. Helps make its playability back. As a 1-1, you don't mind if it gets destroyed or anything like that. It's not too bad of a drawback, and you just have the chance of hitting something really important. So I think this is a nice change. I think this helps a lot. So makes Spider-Ham feel like he has a place in the meta, which is a 2-2. There just were better cards. Like you have to compete with Jeff and stuff like that. It's not that easy. So I think as a 1-1, it has its own niche. Probably like a better Iceman in my opinion. So yeah, definitely cool. Next up, and finally, last card we have here, we have Black Cat. So Black Cat's getting probably the most amount of changes. It's going from a 3-7 to a 4-9. So it's gaining an energy and gaining 2 power. I would say the energy doesn't matter too much. Most people are just using it for the discard effect and then summoning back with Ghost Rider or Hela. But essentially, you're getting 2 extra power. And I talked about how 2 power, even 1 power change is a big deal. 2 power is a huge deal. The only downside you could reasonably argue is that it's now Shang-Chiable. I do think with Hela decks and stuff, a lot of times, you know, maybe Shang-Chi's a problem in Hela decks, so it's kind of fair. But with Ghost Rider, you can also just play Ghost Rider final turn, especially with Zob, and it costs you 3. So definitely an interesting adjustment here. I do wonder if it's going to make it see play, because I'm not the biggest discard player. I do like discard though, but I'm not the biggest discard player, and I do wonder if this is enough of a pool. 2 power is good, but is this enough of a pool to play? Because a lot of decks weren't even playing the card itself, so I do wonder if this is like, oh yeah, 2 power, maybe I'll play it now, because 3-7 was like kind of iffy. 3-9 or 4-9 is pretty good. Black Cat's been one of our weaker performing cards for a long time, so this card's been really bad, basically what they're saying. That might not be something we can fix in our OTA, okay, but we've played with this version enough ourselves to be at least interested in seeing what develops. So they've tried this, they've play tested it, you know, as much as they can, and at least it's interesting to them, especially with a couple of future cards coming. Yes, this makes you more likely to discard her than play her, but the only decks interested in Black Cat were already assuming you'd be doing that. That's true. So I don't think that's too big of a drawback. Increasing her power makes that a better perk, and the number 9 is especially apt for the feline femme fatale. I don't know if 9 matters to Black Cat, but you know, I'm not much of the lore person. But yeah, pretty cool. I do agree. Like, I don't know if this is something that makes discard players want to play her now. But definitely, maybe it is, right? Maybe someone's like, yeah, this is what I've been asking for since the beginning. You know, Black Cat 49, let's go. But I have no clue. So definitely interesting. We'll see if the meta does adjust and start using her in discard decks or so. But definitely a cool change. It's not bad, and I think I do agree that Black Cat was just not a very good card overall. I still think you could play her in Hela and you could play her in some discard lists, but a lot of times it didn't matter. So the one caveat is like 9 energy, right? 9 power is always a scary aspect due to Shang-Chi, but we'll see if that matters in the meta game. Like, you know, and I just feel like making a 3-8 didn't do anything, so it had to be better than that. So definitely an interesting change. But overall, let's look at all of the changes here. Spider-Ham I like. Lady Sif I like as well. Shadow King I like a lot. I like this a lot. And then the Collector I think is reasonable. Try to deal with Loki. So overall, I'm happy with these changes. I think they make sense. Even the Black Cat change, like, it's not gonna hurt anything. The card has been doing pretty bad for a long time, so I'm overall happy. I think they've been doing a pretty good job with their OTAs and their patches in terms of like trying to, you know, hit the right cards and then being aware of like readdressing right with the Spider-Ham if things are too bad on the other side, they nerf it too hard. They want to have a good balance. I'm definitely happy with this. I do wonder how it does change the meta of the game, especially with Mobius coming out as well. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the changes? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Are you a big discard person? Like 2 discard buffs, right? Arguably a discard nerf for Spider-Ham, but you know, like Spider-Ham nerfs a lot of decks, so definitely some cool stuff here. And we'll see your thoughts. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day. Where's my button, chat? There it is. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to I'll let you know. See, I had to record this time twice because I was muted the first time. But it's fine. I did. I'm done. Take care, everybody.